Hi, you're listening to Scribble Talk, a podcast for bid and proposal professionals. My name is Bhaskar Sundram, and with my co-host Ashley Case, we'll be sitting down with our industry leaders to share their stories, discuss their career, and learn how to make an impact in the industry. Today's guest is Todd Packer, Principal Consultant and Executive Syzygyst of Todd Packer Associates LLC, aligning opportunities, value, and excellence to help organizations thrive with new sources of growth and revenue. For over 20 years, his innovative techniques have helped individuals from corporations, universities, nonprofit institutions, small businesses, and healthcare facilities in the US, Canada, and India. A published author and a top-rated presenter, he integrates coaching, research, writing, training, and consulting to launch and manage successful initiatives based on ideas that win. Todd has presented popularly and had highly interactive sessions for professional organization associations, including APMP BPC and Chapter conferences. Todd holds proposal experience in various fields, including US Department of Defense, US Department of Homeland Security, US National Science Foundation, US National Institute of Health, and National Network for Manufacturing Innovation Institute. Previously, Todd has worked as an external innovation manager at Meggitt Aircraft Braking Systems Corporations and as an intellectual property manager at Kent Displays Corp. In addition to this, Todd has also served as a marketing instructor for Kent State University College of Business Administration, research and marketing innovation consultant for CASE, Western Reserve University, and as a management and development consultant for the Tibetan Medical Institution of HH, the Dalai Lama, Dharamsala, India. Todd is also an APMP Foundation level certified. Todd, that's a very interesting bio. So nice to have you, Todd. Welcome to Scribble Talk.
Thank you, Bhaskar. It is an honor to be here today.
Thank you, Todd. Todd, let's go back to the very beginning. Where were you born? And let's talk about your early life.
Certainly. So I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, in the United States, and I grew up in suburb Cleveland Heights and went to Cleveland Heights High School, and then to college in Chicago, the University of Chicago, where I studied anthropology, and then did a combined degree program. So my senior year as an undergraduate was my first year in graduate school, and I got my master's in nonprofit administration. So I combined anthropology with social work.
Wow. Do you have any childhood memories of growing up?
Oh, many. I would say the fondest ones were opportunities to play with friends. I was blessed to be in a neighborhood where I had a number of youth my age, and we would get together and just play in the neighborhood, either games that would span across multiple yards or going to playgrounds and so forth. And that was always exciting. I was raised in a family of artists and activists, so I had a lot of early encouragement in the creative arts, as well as a grounding in trying to contribute to make this a better world. And so through different activities involving volunteer work or a lot of debates with friends and family and so forth, but those facets honed my ideas on what I wanted to be when I grew up. And early on, that was a combination rock star, and I was fascinated by the prospect of being a microbiologist on Mars to be able to investigate the potential of extraterrestrial life. And so those were kind of some guiding ideas from when I was young. So my memories of when I was young.
Wow, that's beautiful. And what brought you into the world of anthropology?
I believe it was interesting to me. I've always been fascinated by cultures beyond my own, and the opportunity to engage with individuals from different backgrounds, from different identities, from different places in the world. And as a student in high school, I was involved in a foreign exchange group where our school would have students from around the world come for a school term, and I was part of a group that would welcome them, and we would do different activities. And through that, I was exposed to folks from different parts of the world. When I enrolled in college, I was interested. I'd had some work as working with children and youth in summer camps, and I was interested in possibly becoming a psychologist or being involved in that area. And when I got to college, I happened to take an introductory course in anthropology and was fascinated by this field where you can explore aspects of identity and psychology in the context of culture. And it was just really enjoyable to me, and to learn about myself and my beliefs and my world, as well as to learn just a number of ideas that I found useful throughout my life about what has meaning to myself and to people I work with has meaning to others, even though it may become manifest in different cultural symbols or rituals or patterns of behavior.
Got it. Any early findings that fascinated you while studying?
I think what was interesting to me was had an early assignment where I was we were looking at different symbols and so forth. And at the time, the band U2 had been popular. It is still popular as a group, but I had the opportunity to see them in concert. And in the concert, people would hold their hands up like you too. And studying anthropology, I had the opportunity to kind of reflect on that kind of in the midst of a music concert that I was enjoying, how folks were able to relatively quickly create a communal experience through a rather simple ritual like that. And that really intrigued me, that my anthropology studies were giving me that kind of illumination to something that seemed really natural to do, to give me a reflection of where would I identify that elsewhere? Where else would there be ways that groups would connect and identify through different relatively simple actions and words and art and that type of thing as well.
Nice. I think we have a Robert Langdon. In fact, I haven't met him, but maybe you're the closest I will come across. So, finishing anthropology, what was next? Todd,
well, as I mentioned, being involved in doing good work, volunteering, was always important to me. And so as an undergraduate, I became involved in Amnesty International, which is a international organization that advocates for human rights and releases of people around the world who've been imprisoned for their beliefs or their freedom of expression. And in doing that work, I began to see this both as something important for me as a profession, but also something that reflected this international cross-cultural perspective that I was beginning to explore. So I thought that, and I had mentioned I was interested in doing something in working with people. And so there was this opportunity at the University of Chicago to pursue a professional degree while in this combined degree program that they had, where your senior year became your first year in graduate school. And there was a fairly renowned School of Social Service Administration at the University of Chicago. And so I applied and was accepted in that program so I could get my master's in social work. And they had both a sort of a clinical social work program and an administrative program. And so I thought this was ideal. Opportunity for me to combine my interests. What was fascinating, and my first introduction to the interesting siloed experience that sometimes happens at universities, was that when I explained what my path was to my anthropology professors, they were saying, well, that's very interesting, but what does social work have to do with the anthropology? And then when I spoke to the social work faculty, they were like, you have some good work experience, but we're not really certain how you'll fit the anthropology in with social work. And so I have a habit sometimes when I'm given challenges like that to take it to heart and really forge that. So that became an interest to me of how can I combine these passions around cross-cultural understanding and so forth into my work in social work. And so my first year I was doing a clinical placement and then had an opportunity to attend a conference that was being housed at the University of Chicago about working with survivors of torture, people who have experienced torture and human rights violations. And at this conference, there were presenters from a center in Minneapolis that had been established as a treatment center. And so I was impressed by the speaker, and I have family in Minneapolis. And so I approached them. This was towards the end of my first year. And in social work school in the US, you have the opportunity to do what's called a field placement, where you're actually placed in a setting in parallel to your academic studies. So I would take classes a couple of days a week, and then I would be in a field placement. My first year, I was in a hospital setting. So I approached the speaker because I was interested in the possibility of arranging a field placement for my second year where I could work in that field, because that combined a couple of my interests and so forth. And she said, you have great experience and so forth, but perhaps you should talk to the people in Chicago who are establishing a center. And so they were at the conference, and I spoke with them and created a field placement where in my second year in graduate school, I had the opportunity to work at this center called the Marjorie Kovler Center for the Treatment of Survivors of Torture, helping them establish this program. It was a humbling and challenging experience, but it was also, for me, a profound alignment of my commitment to making this a better world, doing direct work with people, unfortunately, from around the world, in the sense that human rights violations is an international phenomenon. And it gave me a chance to work at a unique point in organizational development that I've learned over time has been a powerful niche for me, which is at the point when a visionary leader needs help implementing an infrastructure to sustain their organization. And so I had the opportunity to help the center establish their policies and procedures, work on how they would coordinate their program. And what was unique about the program in Chicago was that they had a very small staff and used a network of professional volunteers, both clinical therapists, physicians, occupational therapists, pastoral counselors, as well as community volunteers who would help with interpreting and translating, helping people get food and clothing and shelter. And so that work was really valuable for me to understand those aspects. And it introduced me to the wonderful lessons that working at a grassroots nonprofit has about proposal writing. Because I did that work in graduate school. When I graduated, I had my first position working in the refugee unit of Jewish Vocational Services for a couple of years, helping them manage their computer systems and so forth. And then was able to return to the Marjorie Kovler Center as an employee as their program coordinator. And in that role, I was writing proposals for my own salary. It was very clear to me I was developing funding not only to sustain myself in this program, but to actually build something over time. And that's where I began learning the skills before I had the language of that. I was doing proposal management. It was in the context of fundraising and grant writing. But that's kind of what led to that transition. And I should offer one other aspect. For my master's program, we had the opportunity to do a master's project. So not as formal as a thesis, but more like a way to create a paper. And so what I worked on was a model for the ethical development of information systems. And this was a way that I was trying to create a model by which, at the time, computer systems were being introduced into nonprofit organizations for collecting information on clients and coordinating services and so forth. But there were some challenges when, while it was technically feasible to combine information on a person's, say, therapy services with their criminal record, that could be technically done. Was it ethical or proper to do that? What were the implications for someone's clinical treatment if it was known that they had certain background, or would it affect those things? And I felt that while there were some unique aspects of the social work profession, informed by my work with people that were survivors, and the sheer capacity for human resilience that demonstrated, as well as the critical importance of maintaining anonymity because of how people in those situations have had their identities in many ways used against them. So what I did for my paper was identify a couple different conceptual models for how to develop information systems around concepts of secrecy, privacy, anonymity, and kind of an empowerment model as the final area where you could work with people together to leverage the information to help them both individually and for what they want to accomplish. So, and confidentiality, I should say, was the last area.
So coming over from a very interesting background, getting into proposals, which is much more of, even though we talk innovation, we talk all these things, it's still a restrictive environment where here is a question, write a response to this question within the certain word limit. Sometimes you have images that you could play with. Most of the time, it can even come out in spreadsheets or some very restricted environment. So how were you able to lift and drop yourself in this field, and what are some of the early proposals that you worked on, Todd?
Certainly. So what I found was interesting to me was that what seemed to combine a lot of the skill sets that ended up in what people would bring me on board for helping with proposals were combination of capacity with telling stories with words well, building trust, delivering on promises or commitments to meet requirements. And in many ways, and this is new language, I found that what was most appealing and how I connected it to innovation was around the broader perspective of capture management. How, yes, for each proposal, there are limits and restrictions, from font sizes and page lengths to meeting requirements or the types of organizations that can submit. But I began to see over time that what was more critical was to help build the capacity for a repeatable process. No single proposal would necessarily deliver kind of the value over time, even though within a specific proposal effort, we would often go all out. And I think I'm not alone in this challenging world of proposal management with war stories of how delivering proposals just in time and all that type of thing. But I think what I learned eventually was that wasn't particularly healthy. What was more valuable was to create a process whereby a team could engage on multiple proposals within their capacity. And where I find the unique aspect of proposals, much like, say, a sonnet or a haiku that has very restrictive rhyming patterns, but still can create a very vast range of expression, was that there are ways to use kind of the crucible of each proposal to hone ideas and content and gather information that can be of value to an organization far beyond any specific proposal. So some of the early ones that come to mind were when I was at the Marjorie Kovler Center, we had the opportunity to we were primarily funded by a private donor, but we would get funding from organizations and institutions and so forth. But because we were a small program of a larger social service agency, we were restricted that we couldn't approach any other local foundations that funded other parts of the program because they didn't want like individual programs to compete with each other. So that created a unique opportunity to seek funding from non-local programs that could support what we were doing. So I was able to craft successful proposals to the United Nations, for example, which has a specific fund for centers like this. And then was able to secure some funding from a program in the European Union that actually approved the funding and funded us in ECUs, is that correct? The European Currency Unit, which at the time this would have been early 90s, was very novel, so they actually had to, the fact that it was, I was able to get funding for a grassroots program in Chicago from the European Union was an example to me of how powerful proposals can actually be to bridge that kind of connection and to deliver value and that helped sustain our program. And that kind of was exciting for me to see that happen. But again, at the time, I was seeing this as, specific efforts that were raising money. The whole idea that I was engaged in a disciplined process of managing proposals and capturing opportunities, all that came much later after some time doing this and then learning about APMP and so forth and realizing, oh, okay, this is what I've been doing. So, so those were some examples. And then I had the opportunity to do some travel and volunteer work in India. And in that work, I also had the opportunity at this program in India that you mentioned, Mensi Kong Institute of the Dalai Lama, because for folks who may not realize this, the Tibetan government was forced into exile and India welcomed government. So they have sort of a government set up in Dharamshala in Himachal Pradesh in India. And so the institute I worked at was analogous to a school of medicine and public health. And so even in that capacity, I had the opportunity to work on a proposal. And for there, we were seeking funding from a foundation in the UK to fund, I believe, a documentary film and a library, some support for the library that they had. And so again, a US volunteer at a Tibetan medical institute in India, leveraging a proposal for funding from a foundation in the UK. Again, this kind of international opportunity that the value I was providing again was because of my facility with the English language, was able to craft a proposal and help them edit and prepare it in a way that was, what do we use often, was compliant and compelling enough to secure funding for them. And again, that I kind of did what was coming together for me in my profession of telling a story well, understanding different cultures, putting together a budget and making sure it's very clear what the value was, understanding what the funders' requirements were for the format and so forth. But that those were things I was learning from professions, I guess, that may not typically be seen in the in sort of the training ground of proposal managers, which is what I think is so, one of the amazing things about our profession is that people can come from such divergent pathways into doing this work.
That's a massive impact. I mean, like, yes, you can, as you rightly said, you can do proposals after proposals, but having that impact of being a volunteer, helping out the Dalai Lama's Institute, getting funding from the UK, my God, what an impact that one taught. Beautiful. And moving from there, then you also went back, not just going for grant writing or fund, but you then went back and worked for Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security and stuff. Talk us through that transition all the way to the new Todd Packer.
the new and evolving, as it were. So to clarify, the expertise I had was more for writing proposals to those agencies. So I did not work directly for the federal government. But after, one of my many lessons learned in my time in India was that prior to I began my volunteer work, I was considering launching a consulting practice. I had taken a program in Chicago, had done some small work, and realized I'm kind of interested in this kind of work, but I hadn't really pursued it. But when I was in India, I had the opportunity to, be in a marketplace in India, and I would see people with a basket of fruit, and they had a business, or they would have, a blanket with some simple wares, and they had a business, and they were speaking multiple languages to work with customers and so forth. And I walked around there and I thought, hey, here I am with a master's degree from a university in the United States, and with the resources I've been so lucky to have. And I'm like worried, can I set up a business? Do I have this? And here I see people with doing this in a very vital and real way, and had the opportunity to learn a phrase that I had to repeat often in the marketplace that I think has also influenced my approach to proposal management of kitna, which is how much, and kind of the back and forth negotiating that would often happen to get food or gifts or items. And that seeing entrepreneurs around me in those environments pushed me to, when I returned to the United States, to launch my consulting practice. And I did it, oftentimes I would do it part-time with work that did not compete with full-time work that I would have. But my passion around the consulting work was innovation, has been innovation, continues to be innovation. And the lesson from the grassroots nonprofit world about that was viewing innovation as achieving extraordinary results with limited resources. And my lesson learned from that was from grassroots nonprofits. But after I returned to the US, I began a transition to see how my skills could work in other environments. So I got work as a small business advisor for a nonprofit because I'd gone to this organization for help establishing my consulting business. One of the advisors said, hey, you seem to be good at advising people. We have a position. Would you consider working for a nonprofit helping advise small business owners on launching their businesses and sustaining them? And I agreed to do that. So that began this transition for me from nonprofit work to for-profit businesses and so forth. And it was through that work that and helping that organization raise funds through grant writing and so forth, that I had the opportunity to work for my first for-profit organization, which was a company called Mainsail, and they did staffing and responded to U.S. government opportunities, particularly around enterprise resource planning and SAP implementations and organizational change management. And so I was brought on board as a proposal writer. And it was around that time, I believe, that I first became aware of APMP, because I was beginning this transition to where my skill sets were that I'd honed in kind of the nonprofit arena, where proposals were kind of the pathway where grant writing met, what corporations and for-profit companies would do, seeking opportunities for contracts or and from the federal government for work. So And what was interesting was that that particular company, as part of the job application process, I had to respond to a proposal. They structured kind of an artificial proposal, and they had candidates for the position, act as if we were responding to the proposal. So they had everything down to like the opportunity to ask questions and draft the proposal and so forth. So I won that job, as it were, by submitting a proposal that they felt was representative of the skill set that they wanted to bring on board. And so that's where I began doing work for proposals for the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, and others, typically for staffing teams to do these like enterprise technical implementations. And it was in that work that I began working with subject matter experts in highly technical engineering areas. And people would often ask, like, well, how do I do that? How would I, they're like, oh, so clearly about, what was it? There was a certain kind of radio frequency engineering solutions that I had to talk to some folks about to bring their expertise into proposals. And after a while, people would say, well, you come from an engineering background, correct? And I said, well, my father was a chemical engineer, my mother was a librarian, and my family was also a key influence of words and science, but I did not pursue engineering in, I guess, as a formal academic discipline. But what I did realize was what I was falling back on was my social work skills of reflective listening and active listening, and my anthropology skills of quickly understanding meaning in different cultures. And I began to see this work of working with technical subject matter experts as what they call in anthropology participant observer. And I learned how to ask questions and elicit information that I could use in the proposal content. And oftentimes the best subject matter experts are the busiest. So I had to hone these skills of getting as much information as I can from these experts and translating it, as it were, into the language of the proposals to meet the requirements, to create compelling content, and while being compliant, and building a repeatable process so that the subject matter experts weren't burnt out, so that we could have a way that we can monitor the process of these, manage different folks, and support proposals from larger prime companies as well.
I think while we start our own company, we all call ourselves differently, vice president, senior vice president, director, but you call yourself executive Syzygyst. Yes. Talk us through, what does it stand for?
Sure. So Syzygyst is a term that I coined it comes from a concept in astronomy called syzygy. And that's when three planets align, or three celestial bodies align, such as the sun, the moon, and the earth during a solar eclipse. And I found that a lot of what I was doing was alignment. So in my work, as you mentioned, I align opportunity, value, and excellence, and leverage proposals as a mechanism to have companies showcase their excellence to provide value in response to an opportunity of a provider. And I also have found that the number 3 is pretty powerful in a lot of ways. So I like this idea of aligning alignments. And I found in my work, a lot of what I would do would be this alignment. In the sense that, as I mentioned, extraordinary results from limited resources. Oftentimes, I have found that organizations have the resources they have to excel, but sometimes because organizational knowledge isn't transferred or stored easily and most accessibly, organizations would sometimes miss the value that they can provide. They would miss the successes that they have. And a lot of my work in, sometimes I think our profession views capture management as external. How do we capture business from commercial business or government business and that type of thing. But I also view capture as an internal process as well. How do you capture these stories, whether they're framed as corporate experience and past performance, or capturing the value of the experts that you're bringing on board, or the value of your organization above and beyond, we have worked for this customer and we delivered this result. And to me, that's as critical in creating a compelling story as meeting the requirements and so forth. So I guess my secret superpower, as it were, is in addition to slowly learning how to turn styrofoam cups inside out so they still work, is being a subject matter expert whisperer, in the sense of understanding how to capture what's critical and important and excellent, as it were, from the different subject matter experts. And I view that not only in the narrow definition of, say, a technical, scientific, engineering, research professional, but everyone. Because the wonderful opportunity that I've always loved as a proposal manager is how you engage across an organization, whether it's the legal department or human resources or finance and accounting, who I always go to, and build a strong relationship, because I've never been disappointed by having a great relationship with the finance and accounting team. And unfortunately, they're often ignored by an organization, and crafting a great relationship with them has always served me well. But working with administrative support people, working with staff who are in sometimes in situations working with experts on a manufacturing floor, technicians on a manufacturing line, as well as the engineers behind the products, the project managers and so forth, that recognizing that all of these individuals have a particular expertise, that I, as a proposal manager, if I can honor that and capture that and build that into a proposal, it not only will make that proposal more effective, it can also build their trust so that they'll support opportunities in the future. And again, that's that repeatable process. So not only is it the right thing to do, it also seems to me to work well in making effective proposal management systems. So that kind of recognizing the excellence in the experts and catching that and crafting that into the language while managing the time, everyone's time, has been where I see what continues to thrill me about proposal management. And I'm particularly interested in working with companies in advanced technology or manufacturing, establishing new, like trying to develop new products or new research efforts or new processes tied to my passion around innovation. And that's where I see when you combine this expertise through effective proposal management or content management broadly, you can really galvanize transformative solutions.
Thank you, Todd. That's very useful. I think we talked a lot about your professional career and your application of anthropology, where it all began, to charity funding, volunteering, all the way into running Todd Packer Associates now. So. Let's go back and revisit your hobbies and interests. I'm sure there is,
sure.
And also some of the influences that you have.
Oh, definitely. Well, so in terms of hobbies, so I do enjoy spending time with family, going for walks in nature and that type of thing, and being rejuvenated by that, particularly walking along where I live. There's a major river, and so being able to walk along the river and so forth. And not only do I find it, just helpful and helping me keep healthy, but it does also provide me often with valuable metaphors, as it were, for success. The idea of flow, the flow of water and so forth, being able to adapt as rivers do to their environment, and to be able to deliver as rivers have often done for local economies, I think is forged a powerful metaphor in many ways. Other hobbies, I enjoy music and movies. Avid reader of graphic novels and comic books, and I believe proposal managers are often unrecognized superheroes in our work. And in terms of my interests, I am still passionate about doing volunteer work. I serve on the board of a nonprofit organization called Workman Circle Educational Center of Ohio, and I still ground my work often in the human rights field that's been critically important to me. In particular, Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is a document that came out of, I believe, over 500 rounds of negotiations in the 1940s at the United Nations to create a document that would identify a set of human rights that we all share. And Article 19 focuses on the free expression of ideas, which I believe is central to innovation. So yeah, I guess those are some of the things that connect and that I enjoy doing. And I guess as a hobby is something I enjoy honing my writing skills. I think of the different things that I bring, in addition to sort of eliciting information from subject matter experts, is writing. And so I enjoy opportunities where I get to challenge my writing skills, whether it's in writing scripts for plays or movies or short stories. Or I had a project recently where I was doing the script for modules for a learning management system. So all these are different types of writing skills that I find helpful.
I think what you might have missed out is, I think while you were at school, you were part of a wrestling team, and
yes,
we're also part of the punk rock musical group, and then a few other stuff.
Okay, so yeah, so I can share how those were influential if you'd like.
Yeah.
So in high school, and both of those were when I was in high school. So for the wrestling team, my family growing up was not very much into organized sports, as it were. And so, and I did not have much hand-eye coordination for sports that would involve that, in the States, baseball or analogous cricket, or say other sports like that. And I was concerned that as I was growing up, I was being honed in kind of like to go to college and so forth, but not very much physical strength. And I thought, I could see myself ending up very, very bookish, like what's traditionally seen as a nerd. And I'd seen, unfortunately, some kids in that situation get bullied. And I thought, well, I could follow that path, or I could try something different, completely unexpected. And so when I was, I believe, around 14 or 15, it just came to me that, okay, I will try out for the wrestling team. And what I thought was valuable was wrestling. I would not have to deal with trying to, it was a different kind of hand-eye coordination. I felt that it was something that would help keep me in shape, and that I would meet people that I would not otherwise have met. And I was not a particularly good wrestler, but I had the opportunity to build the skills and get really healthy and fit, and then have some profound lessons from that experience that influenced me in many ways. In fact, I think it was about 10, 15 years after I graduated from high school, I came back to give a speech to the wrestling team about lessons in life I learned as a high school wrestler. And a couple I'll share that I believe influenced my approach to proposal and capture management. So one aspect is in wrestling, it's easy to get distracted by your opponent. If you look at their eyes, or they can kind of distract you with their hands. But if you observe the direction of their hips, if you watch where they're going and not necessarily where they're looking, then you can be more effective at taking them down and winning your match. And I believe in similar analogy in capture management is that if you do the research to really observe where an organization is putting their resources versus what they may be promoting in their public relations and so forth, you can be more effective in understanding, as I say, reading between the lines of the content of a proposal. And then in our high school wrestling matches, we always shook hands before each match and shook hands after. So that really taught me a valuable lesson in understanding how, while each match is intense, has a winner, loser, or sometimes can come to a draw, you treat everyone with respect. You treat your opponents with respect. In the proposal management field, that could be your competitors on a particular bid, because you never know when you may need to ally with them on another bid, or by treating them respectfully at the beginning and the end of the process, even though the actual specific bid or tender process is highly competitive. That idea that you are engaged in something that's worthy of respect, I felt was very important from that lesson as well. And then as for the punk band, for the record, it was Power Frog and the Sonic Vector Angels. And I was responsible for the drums. And I kept breaking the drumsticks, so my bandmates cut off 2 broom handles and had me play on cardboard boxes. And we didn't play, like, we practiced a lot for fun, and we played a couple times at different, like a school talent show and that type of thing. But what was powerful for me about punk rock as a music style and genre, and I guess a lesson for proposal management, was that what drew me to that was I do not have a particularly skilled singing voice, and punk was a very much do-it-yourself movement aesthetic. The resources you have available and the intensity of what you want to express and the camaraderie you can build with a group became the music, became what you were creating. And I had very brilliant bandmates who built their own electric guitars, and the fact that we could come together with limited resources to create these songs that may have had limited appeal, but for me was a great opportunity for expression, was really neat. It helped me forge some strong friendships, but in the proposal world, it helped me understand that everyone has something to contribute. Sometimes it gets I've been in situations where sometimes people are treated disrespectfully because they are new, or they're student interns, or they're not, their ideas are seen as we tried that before, or what particularly I struggle with as a small business advisor is when I encounter business owners who say things like, we tried government contracting once and it didn't work out, so we're done with it. The idea of people being very dismissive of things, when sometimes it is just bringing together, listening to people with different backgrounds with the resources you have today, and assembling a group to deliver a result. And sometimes it's not always pretty, but if it can connect with an audience, then it can still deliver value. And I think what I also learned was, because there's so many different perceptions about punk rock music, and because it can cover such a vast array of ideologies and perspectives, from people espousing violence to folks who are don't do any drugs or advocate for racial equality. It helped me understand that my beliefs, my ideology, my commitment to values, as it were, was critical, because no process necessarily will grant you that. There's nothing. The mechanics of proposal management don't necessarily guarantee an ethics of it, as it were, and integrity. That is dependent on us as individuals and the teams we build and the cultures we create. And so I think realizing that, a style of music that I liked also would have musicians or music that I did not respect the messaging of, helped me understand, wow, there is a unique and profound responsibility we have in proposal management tied to these values. Because for every, not to be too simplistic, but, proposals can be used to cause harm, unfortunately, as well as much as they can facilitate success or the best in society. So I think that was another lesson from punk. Life as a punk, as it were.
There are lots of solid messages there, Todd. And as we close the episode, is there any part of your life or career that we have missed, or is there anything else you would like to share to the listeners? But most importantly, tell us people who you are most grateful for in both your life and career so far.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'll start with that. Folks I'm most grateful for in my life are definitely my parents and my wife Wendy, and my children and my extended family and my extended family that really helped me understand connections. That I'm deeply grateful for the friendships that I've sustained through my life and have continued to maintain, which have been really important to me. I'm grateful for the professional colleagues who took a risk on nurturing and sustaining me, the incredible mentors that I've had, including folks that I believe have been guests like Stacy Dewey from APMP and Karen Hansel, who have been really valuable to Mike Parkinson and others in the APMP profession that have welcomed me, as well as mentors that I've had in school, in other professional associations, in my volunteer work, and so forth. Grateful to you, Bhaskar, for this opportunity and for the great work you do in highlighting individuals in our work, and to the many folks that toil in our profession to deliver value to organizations and to our world. In terms of things that that were important to me, there was one thing that I wanted to present to you that as I was thinking about things I wanted to say. So in addition to anthropology, I should say that I'm also fascinated by philosophy and in particular phenomenology. So I like to sometimes look at abstract things from the concrete to sort of the ideas behind it. And as I was thinking about how could I weave this into what I wanted to talk about today, I want to issue, I guess, a request, a challenge, an opportunity, an invitation to continue dialogue that I want to let proposal managers know. I want to start some conversations about the philosophy of what we do. So much of our training is in the mechanics, and so much of the certification program has been about the maximum number of bullet points and how you phrase a capture strategy or and that type of thing, and not so much about the history, the philosophy, the ideas behind what we do. And I started to think that it's important not only from a profession point of view, that as the profession of proposal management develops and matures, we need things like discussions about different philosophies, different ideas. What is it that we do? And ideally, as it would come manifest in something like a peer-reviewed research journal or something like that, because I don't believe there's much formal in research in our profession, even though there's many years of this, and I think that could contribute well. But I think to be effective in that, we need some conversations about this phenomenon that we do, whether it's what is this philosophy? What are the ways we can analyze proposal management from the perspective of ideas? And not only do I feel it's important from managing our profession, I also feel it's critical because the technology is transforming our industry. Mm-hmm. And if we don't identify the core ideas behind what we do, like what is it that actually, a proposal is seen as a concrete document, but what are we doing in using words and images to construct a trusting relationship where we can deliver value to meet requirements? I think it's important that these aren't just like ivory tower conversations, but these are vital to what we do, because as the technology changes, we may no longer deal with physical or electronic proposal documents. Our presentations will expand beyond sort of oral pitches and slide decks to involve video and so forth. And then as the metaverse expands, and there may be opportunities for that. There are, which reminds me of another person to thank, is Vasudha Murthy, the new chair of APMP India, who has been a great resource. But as these opportunities and new technologies emerge, the next generation of proposal managers may never touch a 3-ring binder, may never have to worry about arranging the express delivery person and figuring out what's the last hour to drop off the envelopes to deliver that, may never deal with ensuring that there's a right protected compact disc. Many of the practical aspects of what we do, the technology continues to transform. So what is it that we do? What is this? And I think having a dialogue with yourself, with others in the profession about this, what would you call it? Like the metaphysics and epistemology of proposal management, or like a philosophical understanding, so we can craft what these ideas are that are technology agnostic, so that we can prepare ourselves now for a future where how we function between the organizations that provide services and products and the organizations that request those services and products, we are seen as essential and vital and evergreen and relevant and brimming with integrity and innovation. So that's what I wanted to say. An invitation to continue that dialogue on that will be something important.
Thank you, Todd. I think that's a very powerful end to the podcast. And as you rightly said, what is it that we do, philosophical level. And that comes, that's a very interesting debate. And I would be very up for it and host you to go deeper on that in the other podcasts or in webinar format, just so that we could ask more questions than standardize and say, this is how we do things, regardless of where you are from, what type of tenders do you do, it's public or private, or what geography do you do. I think the world moves into standardization, but on the other side, if we can dwell into the philosophy of it, it raises a lot more questions and answers. Brilliant point, that one. So Todd, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here, and thank you for sharing. And thank you for, I know we could have easily gone for more episodes here, but I'm sure that consider this as part 1. Wish you, your family, all the loved ones, all the good health, success, and all the very best with Todd Packer. And I'll speak to you very soon, Todd. Take good care.
Yes. Thank you yourself, Bhaskar. All the best to you and your family and loved ones. And please, please, please keep up the great work that you do.
Thank you so much, Todd.
To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Please visit batchyscribble.com/podcast to listen to this episode and check out any of our other previously recorded episodes. If you've enjoyed today's interview, don't forget to subscribe, review, and share the Scribble Talk podcast. We hope you'll check out our next episode, where we interview another industry expert and special guest. Until then, it's Ashley Kays,
Bhaskar Sundram,
signing off.